Hi all, welcome to IIDA East Bay Forum's virtual series. Our theme this year is Design for Dignity. My name is Patricia Hernandez and I'm the Director-elect for IIDA East Bay City Center. As we begin today's discussion on homelessness and housing in our communities, we want to also take the moment to acknowledge the powerful contributions our designers make in our community. That powerful contribution is one of the reasons IIDA is working to elevate the commercial interior design profession. What does elevating the profession look like? We strive to raise public awareness of our work and correct misconceptions of what we do. Maybe you have heard some of these examples when you tell your friends and family that you are an interior designer. We also meet with California lawmakers to educate them on the impact we make in their communities by highlighting some of the projects like libraries, office buildings, and hospitals that serve their continuance. And we advocate for the legal recognition of our profession as practitioners who affect the health, safety, and welfare of our community. We want to use your voice so you can join the effort to elevate the profession. You can text interior designer to 52886 and take the IIDA Design Professional Survey, where you can virtually attend IIDA's National Advocacy Symposium this September. Check out the chat box for the link to the survey and event details. We also want to take a moment to thank all of our patrons. Without all of you, this would not be possible. Today's moderator will be Rebecca Hathorn. She is the Regional Director at Side by Side in Alameda County. Side by Side is IIDA East Bay's selected philanthropic partner for the year. And thank you so much for joining us today. I will let Rebecca take it away.
Thank you, Patricia. Welcome, everybody. I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled that Side by Side was chosen as the philanthropic partner this year. I can tell you a little bit about myself. I'm an East Coast transplant. I was born and raised in Pennsylvania and moved here 15 years ago. Started working at an agency called Bay Area Youth Centers, which merged with Sunny Hill Services, and today we are all side by side. So I have been at my agency for 15 years as well. I started there as a clinical social worker in our transitional housing program. I am very passionate about integrating mental health services and housing services for current and former foster youth and those youth who have been in the probation system. I can introduce our lovely panelists for this evening. Daniel Cooperman with Alameda County Housing and Community Development, Mayor Libby Schaaf, Andrea Urton, CEO of HomeFirst Services, and Seth Orgain, Senior Architect at Gensler.
Everybody.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the intersection of homelessness and foster care. Approximately 26,000 youth age out of foster care every year. Aging out means that the state has developed or come up with an age that they believe is no longer considered a dependent. And in the state of California, that age, for wonderful reasons, was increased to 21 in the year of 2012. So youth are now aging out of the foster care system in California at age 21, giving them a couple more years as dependents to have available resources. Unfortunately, homelessness following, whoops, not quite done with that one. Unfortunately, homelessness following foster care is not rare. By age 26, 36% of former foster youth are reporting at least one episode of homelessness. And in 2019, the Alameda County homelessness count found that 9% of the homeless population were transition-aged youth ages 18 to 24. All right. So youth who are aging out of the system are often left in limbo because they don't have the available resources from biological families. And so typically young people live with their families now, usually past the age of 18, given the cost of living, and are also using those families for resources. Your family can hook you up with your first job, help you with financial support, those sorts of things. When foster youth are aging out, they unfortunately don't have those families available to them. And if the families are available, they're usually not in a place where they can offer financial support. So some statistics about homelessness among the foster youth population. 65% of youth leaving foster care need immediate housing upon release. So when they're aging out, they're turning 21 and they need a place to go. And 22.2% of them are experiencing homelessness after the age of 18. Unfortunately, a lot of youth are also experiencing homelessness while they are still in the foster care system, especially those that are between the ages of 18 and 21. Foster care placements and transitional housing programs are very few, and there's not enough spots for everybody. 33.2% of foster alumni have household incomes at or below the poverty level, obviously making it pretty challenging to secure any housing on their own. And with little to no resources and money, oftentimes foster youth are pushed into or gravitate towards illegal activities to get their needs met. Foster youth are 5 to 10 times more likely to enter the juvenile justice system, and 25% are incarcerated within the first 2 years of emancipation, which is aging out. As you might believe is true, the mental health symptoms among foster youth are very prevalent. 25.2% of foster alumni are diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, which is nearly double the rate of U.S. war veterans. So what we do at Side by Side to kind of help with this, address this issue, we have a transitional housing program for youth ages 16 to 24, for current and former foster youth, as well as youth who are on probation currently or were on probation. We have 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments that are scattered throughout Hayward and San Leandro. And by scattered, that means that they are in the community. So these youth can be living next to you or any other community members. As I mentioned before, we do weave mental health services throughout all of our programming. We believe that offering the mental health support alongside of the housing and the life skills is crucial to the success of these young people. We spend time doing life skills, budgeting, relationship management, lots of roommate meetings, grocery shopping, employment and educational support, and again, offer our youth lots of staff support. They're each paired with a team of 2 staff, 1 clinical, and can also be paired with a 3rd therapist if they are interested. So transitional housing programs are a powerful tool in preventing homelessness. There are quite a few programs throughout the state of California that are working towards preventing homelessness among this population. The biggest challenge that we run up against is that the state and county payment or rate is not enough to meet, doesn't currently cover the cost of placement. The rate was developed in 2012. Since then, it's been increased by 24%, while the cost of housing has increased by 64%. So as you can imagine, there's a pretty big gap that needs to be covered. We use a variety of private fundraising from individuals and foundations to kind of fill in that gap. And the effects of COVID on youth in California. So 41% of transitional housing providers have seen an increase in their wait list due to COVID-19. As I mentioned before, a lot of youth who are in care and dependent find themselves homeless. And so when the pandemic started and the shelter in place started, there was a big rush and push to get those youth housed. So it increased everybody's wait list. 67% have reported an increase in youth-specific issues. At Side by Side specifically, we noticed a huge increase in safety issues, as well as neighbor complaints or landlords and property managers asking for youth to be exited from the program. With everybody being home all the time, a lot of the activities that our youth were engaging in typically outside of their apartments were being brought into the apartments, and then all of the neighbors were complaining. Overall, there's also been an increase in LGBTQ referrals, which side by side is seen in our space program. This is mainly due to family conflicts and youth feeling unsafe at home. LGBTQ identified youth who live at home pre-pandemic would have the option to go to community centers and access other resources to kind of get them out of their own space, which felt unsafe. And so now with the pandemic, they're all being forced to kind of live at home with parents or family members who may not support their identity. And then most of our youth who are working in hospitality and service, which, as we all know, has been hit pretty hard with the pandemic. And so a lot of them found themselves without employment. I can say that within the last month or so, a lot of them are finding jobs again as things kind of reopen and figure out how to do all of this. And next, we will call on Daniel Cooperman.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here today. So I'm Daniel Cooperman. I'm one of the managers at Alameda County Housing Community Development. I spent the last 12 years working at different nonprofits around the Bay Area, specifically Alameda County, born and raised here. So this is definitely a near and dear issue to my heart. Go to the next slide. All right, so here, this is the 2019 point in time count. I'm really just here to illustrate the issue that we have with the unsheltered population. So you can see the huge rise from 2009 to 2019 in the levels of homelessness across Alameda County. The thing about this is while it is a very educated estimate, it is not extremely scientific. And so most people think this number is probably 2 to 3 times greater in reality of who experiences homelessness in any given year. So you can really see the need. On the right, you can see sort of the levels of shelter that we have throughout the county. So different cities are doing different things right now. Obviously with COVID, it's really impacting the congregate shelter settings across the county, across everywhere at this point. And so it's actually limiting shelter capacity, which then makes it an even bigger health and safety issue in the streets. I think sort of what COVID has brought up is that people do need shelter, people need permanent housing, people need solutions. And I know a lot of the cities in the county has partnered for some creative interventions, but as you can see by these numbers, having over 6,000 people unsheltered is an issue and something that gets talked about every day. So here there's more statistics sort of around different demographic things within the homeless community. You can see on the left there's what might have prevented homelessness. And so while there's different programs like Keep Oakland Housed with Mayor Schaaf and the city of Oakland for helping renters who are behind on their rent, these are really the main issues. And you can see rental assistance, benefit income, and employment assistance are the biggest gap. And so that's financial things that we're talking about along with services. So that's really the main thing that is keeping people, that is allowing people to fall into homelessness at quite a rate. In this county, we're actually housing people at a higher rate each year after year, but we are still having, for every one person we're housed, 2 to 3 people are falling into homelessness. And so that's how this issue keeps on progressing. And then on the right side, you can see sort of the living situation. So we have 34% of people living in encampments and tents, 23% people in cars, 22 in RVs. And so this is where people are staying. And this is, the issue is that people step over our unsheltered community every day, and they are like literally sleeping on our sidewalks. And so I think with this health crisis we're having with the COVID-19, this is really illustrating the need that everyone does need their own place. They need a place that they can call their own to really be a part of society. And then also for just, it's a health issue. It's not only just a humanistic issue, it is a health issue. And then beyond that, for our homeless population, you can see like these are Alameda County residents. They are born here, they stay here. So it's a big misnomer to say people come from, you know, Idaho to come to Oakland or Berkeley. People are from here, and we need to take care of our community. This is just a little bit of breakdown. In this county, we've done a better job of housing homeless families, but you can see the predominantly single adults are our homeless community. There's a big veteran population, and as Rebecca mentioned, the transition age youth, people aging out of foster care, is a huge issue, and you can just sort of see the unsheltered numbers next to the sheltered numbers. It just really interesting data to analyze. As I mentioned earlier, families are by far the most sheltered group within this demographic, but as I mentioned earlier, there's just not enough shelter for where we are right now. And then finally, some more demographics. You can see there's not a whole ton of rhyme or reason of the age of homelessness. It is really across the board in this county. Not a lot of people becoming homeless at an older age, but I think especially in light of this pandemic, you'll see an older population becoming homeless afterwards. But as you can see up top, people of color are disproportionately affected by homelessness versus non-people of color. That's no surprise here, and it's just something that homeless services providers and really everyone need to keep an eye on as we spring up new programs and we try and progress what we're doing. And I think that is it for me. Yeah, so there's a lot of chronic health conditions that come along with homelessness. I forgot to put this in here. 42% of people who are experiencing homelessness have a disabling conditions. I mean, you can imagine there are reasons people fall into homelessness. There is not just, I think, a lot of the stigma that comes along with homelessness. It's proven to be false time and time again. And here's some real statistics to back that up. And this is just repeating the slide from earlier. So, there we go. Thank you, guys.
Oh, whoops, I was muted. So sorry. Thanks, Daniel. Now I will turn it over to Mayor Schaaf.
Great. Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for having me. You wanted my introduction to cover kind of how I got involved, like what's my story. I've been the mayor of Oakland for 6.5 years. I've worked in city government for 21 years. And for many years, I was taught that homelessness is not the responsibility of city government. It's a county issue. But I will tell you, several years ago, and if you can go to my first slide, the level of street homelessness in Oakland was just something beyond belief. I'm born and raised in my city, and we had never seen these tent encampments. Hundreds of people just living on our median strips at the base of freeway exits. It was unbelievable. And the thing that really pushed me over the edge, and I will just say, just getting off that before picture is literally what you would see when you got off the North Gate freeway entrance, one of our main gateways to our downtown. There were literally almost 100 people living at the base of that freeway entrance. And the thing that just put me over the edge, aside from the fact that it was just soul scathing, as someone who loved my city and was proud of it and wanted it to look beautiful, but more importantly, just as a compassionate human being, could not believe that we as a society were allowing this many people to sleep on our streets. I was shocked to find that every night we had empty beds in our shelter, every night. And that is what really started my quest to become an expert in homelessness. Mayors have to be experts in lots of things. Please go back. I'm not ready to switch my slide yet. Go back. So I started on my quest to find out, how is it possible that people are not taking us up on our offer of shelter. St. Vincent de Paul's, just down the street from where 100 people were living under my freeway. And we experimented with something called cabin communities. And that's that picture that you see that says after. What we did is we found lots that were right next door to where these encampments were, so that we allowed the encampment to stay together as a community, to preserve those communal bonds. And we created these little cabins. And listen, I'm not proud, they're not pretty. I'm embarrassed in front of all you fancy design professionals. In fact, the first set we used were actually Tough Sheds. Yes, we ordered them from Tough Shed, but they were warm, they were dry, they had double paned windows, so they were quiet inside, and they allowed something that was not offered at the traditional congregate shelter. And that is that these individuals got to go to sleep at night behind a locked door with their pets, their possessions, their partners, and something you really don't see, their privacy. So think about those 4 Ps. And in offering this type of move, we were able to get nearly every single, I think we had about 90% acceptance to move into this cabin community form of shelter from a group of people that had turned down the traditional congregate shelter, just a big room with a lot of people that you don't know, no pets allowed, no sleeping with partners, your possessions may or may not be there if you got to drag them in and out every day. So this was an epiphany, and I have held this lesson in my heart as we have gone on this journey to try and give everyone the dignity of a roof over their heads. The other thing I was shocked about was I kept on hearing that much of our problem was fueled not because, as Daniel pointed out, that we weren't doing a really good job of moving people from homeless to housed, but because we could not keep up with the level of new people who were falling into homelessness. And so I went to the philanthropic community and I said, we've got to prevent homelessness in Oakland. How can we do that? And from that, an initiative called Keep Oakland Housed was born. So that's my next slide. This is Deborah Ross. I actually met her before she ever found out about Keep Oakland Housed. She is so bubbly and just the loveliest human being you could ever meet. She makes these amazing hats. I had actually bought some of her hats from her. She herself had experienced homelessness. She was one of those elders who was living in her car for over a year, but she had finally found an apartment that she could afford, where she could actually run her little small business, and also where she could take in her grandson, who really needed a more healthy living situation. And so she was pretty devastated when she got home to an eviction notice on her door. It was true that she had had some bad months. She had fallen behind in her utility bills and her rent, and she was facing an eviction. And that was so frightening to her because she had experienced homelessness before. But she found out about Keep Oakland Housed, and Keep Oakland Housed does 3 things. One, provides immediate cash assistance, and that can be for whatever that person needs. It can be back rent, back utilities. One family just needed a washing machine so they could keep the breadwinner's uniform clean. But it's whatever you need. We provide case management and we provide free legal support. Deborah Ross has stayed housed, and all she needed was $800. How many of you have $800 in your checking account? I'm telling you, I would gladly give my $800 to Deborah Ross. And that is how Keep Oakland Housed was born. In its first year and a half, it kept 2,100 households safely housed in Oakland, preventing homelessness. That is something that we have to invest much more in. Next slide. I was also asked to talk about funding. One of the things that scares the bejeebers out of me is we have done a really good job in Oakland of increasing our investment in homelessness. Just even this year compared to last year, we doubled our homelessness budget from about 33 million to about 66 million. But you need to know that 64% of my funding is one-time funding. And I'm using it to run shelters, to run those cabin communities. We've also stood up safe RV parks. I mean, I don't know if anyone else was surprised at that statistic that 45% of our unsheltered residents are living in their cars, vans, or RVs. So this idea of safe places for vehicles is really critical. So it was very exciting. You know, I was selected by Governor Gavin Newsom to serve on his Council of Regional Homeless Advisors. We celebrated a huge victory in January when the governor dedicated his entire State of the State address just to homelessness. And in it, he pledged that we needed more than one-time funding. We needed sustainable revenue, and that his top priority this year was to create an ongoing source of funding that was significant enough to stop this #1 challenge, homelessness, until that was no longer the one-time challenge. Obviously, this pandemic has taken everything off the table. And so we are sitting here today thinking about the impacts of this virus on our economic well-being. As Daniel showed you, so much of homelessness is driven by economics, not the traditional ideas of mental health or substance abuse, pure economics. And I am certainly afraid that when these eviction moratoriums get lifted, we are going to see homelessness Armageddon. And yet we have not had the ability to hold the governor to his promise to make good on creating this sustainable form of funding. And again, just to give you an idea, even though we've worked so hard to increase funding from the city, when we did our model of what would it take for us just to get to a point where we are reducing homelessness over the next 5 years, we identified a need for $123 million a year. And again, my budget right now is 66. Last slide. I want to end with 2 stories that are both illustrative of our challenges and our hope. On your left of your screen is Bishop Emery. He was one of the first residents to move into that cabin community that you saw in my first slide. He's an elder. He had worked part-time for Berkeley Department of Parks and Rec. He grew up just blocks away from where he was living in a box under the freeway. It was so exciting to see him go from that box into one of those cabin communities. You see him holding up the key to his cabin. He actually did a little dance when he got that key. And then I had the great joy of going to visit him in his own apartment, because one of our commitments in Oakland is to not create a shelter bed, and that could be a bed in one of those cabins, without resources for an exit. The point is not to get people into shelter, it's to get them into housing. And I got to visit Bishop Emery in his own apartment right before Christmas. And then a few months later, I had to attend his funeral. Every day that we leave, especially our elders, out on the street, even if we eventually get them into housing, we are robbing them of their lives, of their health. And it was reflective for me to be at his memorial service and hear from, he had 9 brothers and sisters, again, born and raised right here in Oakland. And I was reflecting as we've done our modeling and thought much more intentionally about the role of structural racism in homelessness. It cannot be underemphasized what a role structural racism plays. Employment discrimination, housing discrimination, and even when you have family members who are securely housed, the conditions of their lease don't allow them to bring in their uncle, their grandfather, Bishop Emery. And to hear the pain of his family members that they could not do more to support him was palpable at that service. To his right is Prince Channer. Prince is someone else who sought refuge in one of these cabin communities. Prince came to California. He actually was not from here, but he was lured by the promise of Silicon Valley. He was a young man that loved technology, but he was hit with employment discrimination. Again, part of structural racism. He could not find a place to live. He had not quite finished his college degree, but this incredibly resilient young man was living in his car, figured out how to hack into Starbucks Wi-Fi, and actually finished his college degree while homeless and living in his car. I'm very happy to say that today, Prince is working as a social media director for a nonprofit organization. That is our hope. There is incredible talent and resilience in the people that just need a small bit of help to get off of the streets and into our societies. With that, I thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Mayor Schaaf. I do want to let people know that if you have any questions, please enter them into the chat room so that we can answer them at the end. Next up is Andrea Urton.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here tonight. I'm very excited to be here. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about HomeFirst Services, the organization that I'm lucky enough to work for. The challenging landscape of homelessness due to the pandemic, homelessness through the eyes of a woman, and then solutions needed to end homelessness. So I arrived here, this is a little bit about me. I arrived here in the Bay Area at the age of 27 to finish my MS degree in clinical psychology and madly fell in love with the area. I completed my licensed marriage family therapist degree and certificate and began working on the east side in San Jose with high-risk youth and families. I worked very closely with CPS, with our court system, children in residential care, children in foster care. I've spent the last 20 years in nonprofit administration, and I think I'm one of the luckiest people on earth to do what I do for a living. 6 years ago, I came to HomeFirst Services as a first-time CEO, and I fell madly in love with the organization and the work that we were tasked with doing. HomeFirst is the oldest homelessness organization in Santa Clara County. We are also the largest, and we're the premier provider of veteran services, which I'm extremely proud of. We offer a continuum of care, starting with outreach in the encampment, including deep dive outreach with supportive services like mental health, case management, and substance abuse treatment, all right there in the encampment so we can meet people where they're at. From there, we do our best to bring them into our emergency shelter solutions. We operate the largest shelter in the county, the Picardo Reception Center, with 250 people a night. Currently, in the height of the pandemic, we were operating 9 shelters 24/7 to house about 1,000 people a night. So it's just been crazy with all the services we've been providing. We also offer a continuum of care of supportive services. We have housing searches, we have case management, we have mental health, we have other supportive services such as, back please, thank you, such as alcohol and drug services. We also, like I said, are the largest provider and the premier provider of veteran services to them as well as to their families. We have an extremely high success rate with our veterans programs. 84% of the veterans that we house stay housed within a year. That's a really high number, and we're very proud of that. We offer permanent supportive housing solutions, so people who are housed but need help to stay housed, we do that as well. And finally, we end the continuum with affordable housing. We have 98 units that we house families and people, individuals who were formerly homeless. Next slide, please. So the changing landscape of homelessness due to COVID, I think it rocked everybody's world. I'm sure the mayor would say that. The city and county and Santa Clara County bonded in a way that I'd never seen. And they came together to help the providers find solutions. We rallied with a series of solutions I'll talk about in a little bit later. But first, we started as an executive leadership team. I'm lucky enough to have 2 board members who were military leaders, very high-level military leaders, and I got a crash course in military leadership. We met every single day for the first 2 months of the pandemic to make decisions and make changes. We did plan, do, act, assess, rinse, and repeat every single day as new information came out. We realized that there was a critical need for infrastructure, and we were lucky that we had most of that in place. We also set ourselves up with a PPP loan, as nobody knows what the landscape for funding is going to look forward like in the next couple of years. We assessed services and we engaged in operational changes necessary to meet people where they were at as safely as we possibly could. As essential service providers, as Rebecca's organization, we knew we couldn't stop services, but we were mandated to keep our employees as safe as we could and the most vulnerable people that we serve safe. We had an array of facility issues to deal with. We stopped all referrals. We started social distancing, sleeping people head to toe. We had ordered $20,000 worth of UV sanitizing lights. We created additional airflow in our facilities, temperature checks, you name it, we did it. And I think the biggest learning was that we realized we had to be nimble and quick due to the constant changing environment. And because we had support from the city and county in doing that, so far, knock on wood, we're doing very well at our shelters and we've had a limited amount of positive tests. Next slide, please. So what are we doing just across the way from you all? Probably very similar to what the mayor and what the county people are doing. We've expanded our current shelter. We added 4 new additional shelters. We added additional deep dive encampment support. So the city and HomeFirst, we've identified more than 20 encampments with 20 people. We've been providing garbage pickup, porta potties, hand washing stations, meals, and deep dive case management services. We've doubled the current outreach, adding those deep dive services, which has just been critical. We're building 4 additional interim bridge housing communities for 340 new units. We're very excited about that. 2 of them should come online by August 30th. That's the goal. We had Project Room Key that in our county alone housed over 1,000 people very quickly, I might add. The city and county came together to create a coordinated entry system. They funneled calls 7 days a week, at first 24 hours a day and then 9 to 6. And they actually placed people who were most vulnerable in the motels and hotels first. Then they moved to congregate shelters, and then they moved to our bridge housing community, which is very much like the mayor's little cabins, which I think are adorable. And finally, we increased our medical services at our shelters and in our encampments. So we've got nurses and doctors going with our outreach teams into the encampments to make sure that people are getting the care they need and getting the education they need about how to care for themselves. Next slide, please. So that's the pandemic and COVID, which is all a real part of our life. And I don't want to forget something that's a real part of our life before that and will be after that. And that's the unique challenges faced by women who are homeless. So I heard many years ago, and I don't know if it's accurate or not, that within 4 hours of becoming homeless, a woman is likely to be either sexually assaulted or propositioned inappropriately for sex. I've seen that to be true at our shelters and in the encampments, and we do our best to make sure that we're out there trying to keep people safe, but it doesn't do a whole lot of good. Women are either forced to engage in prostitution who are homeless or engaging in prostitution because they have no other way to survive. They're deteriorating health during reproductive years and also as menopause. I think people have alluded to this earlier, that being homeless is extremely hard on you and it ages you drastically. So if you're 40, you're representing as somebody who is 60 or 60 and older with those health issues instead of as a woman who is 40 and healthy. So it's extremely unfortunate. Also, we've got the issue of periods menstrual health for women. Women have to choose when they're homeless to either buy a box of product, which is about $7 on average, or to eat for a day or two. And so unfortunately, many women make the choice to eat. And so they're using products and things that are used or dirty or unsanitary. This is creating a whole host of issues for female health, and women are landing in the hospital at an alarming rate. There's the lack of safety and security. Unfortunately, this means that many women are connecting with men who are not appropriate. So they're engaging in relationships to stay safe with very unsafe men. As a result, we have a high degree of domestic violence. And this is one of the largest contributing factors to women being homeless, is the domestic violence. Number 6, we've got gender inequality in jobs. It's unfortunate, but as women age out of the workforce, they don't have the same ability to keep up with the rental increases and other cost of living expenses. So they often find themselves on the street because they were no longer to pay their rent, or because they were let go from their job because they weren't relevant enough, or didn't have the level of education that the newer kids have. Number 7, and this is something I deal with as a provider on a daily basis, is extreme depression. About 1 in 4 homeless people face extreme mental issues, which goes untreated. In other words, 47% of homeless women meet the criteria for a major depressive disorder alone, which is twice the rate of women in the general population. This is unfortunate but true. There's also a very high rate of PTSD due to some of the trauma that they've experienced while homeless. And finally, all added up, we're talking about victimization. Homeless women are particularly vulnerable to multiple forms of victimization. Subsequently, the shelters for women are unsafe, and they have reported extreme physical and mental violence inside the safe places. So we need to do more to keep women safe, not just on the streets, but in our shelters. Next slide, please. So reasons for the growing population of unhoused women. The disparity between rent and income is number 1. In Santa Clara County, we've got 269 homeless families, and they have 921 members approximately. Many of those are young women. Many of those are young women from foster care, unfortunately. And these are our most vulnerable because we're not giving them the chance in life that they need to be successful. Number 2, lack of affordable housing. I don't know about you, but a family of 4 in Santa Clara County needs to make $129,000 a year just to meet their basic needs. That's hard to do if you're uneducated or you're working at Subway. Again, domestic violence. This is the largest contributing factor of women who are homeless. Most of the women face physical and sexual abuse from their partners, which leaves them with no other choice but to leave their home. 4, old age. Women in their 50s expect financial and emotional stability in professional and personal lives. However, many women, especially single mothers, never are at the receiving ends of that. And number 5, poverty, especially with our communities of color. We've got income inequity, we've got housing inequity, we've got education inequity, we've got systems that have been historically filled with racism that have kept our people from color moving forward to get the educations, to get affordable childcare, to get the things they need to keep working so they can keep their house. And then finally for women, unplanned pregnancy. And I think we all understand that one. When you're homeless and you're on the street and you're either prostituting yourself or using substances just because you have no other way to feel good for a moment, unfortunately, birth control is hard to find. And so there's a lot of unplanned pregnancies in that community. Next slide. So here's some of the data. Among industrial nations, the US has the largest number of homeless women and the highest number on record since the Great Depression. An estimated 50% of all homeless people are women. Up to 92% of homeless women have experienced severe sexual or physical assault at some point in their lives. Some of that has led to why they are homeless in the first place. 57% of women cite sexual or domestic violence as the direct cause of their homelessness. 63% have been victims of domestic violence from an intimate partner. 32% have been assaulted by their current or most recent partner. And it goes on. Next slide, please. So what do we do to prevent women from becoming homeless? Community support, number one. I think we all know what we need to do. We need to fund childcare programs. We need to create opportunities for job training and education. We need to make sure that people have access to affordable housing. And we need to make sure that there are subsidies for the people who are making an extremely low income, who need that subsidy in order to pay their rent and get by on a daily basis. We need to enhance access to public systems, services, and appropriate supports, early intervention strategies. The $800 the mayor spoke about kept a woman housed. I mean, the return on your investment right there with her dignity and self-respect alone is worth that. And then if we can meet people where they're at and look at them with a philosophy of non-judgment, knowing that if there's an alcohol or drug or mental health problem, let's get them housed first. Then let's provide them solutions. Let's not look at them and say what they can do differently to succeed. Let's support them and help them through the challenge of being homeless to being housed, and then giving them the resources they need. Next slide. And finally, what solutions do we need to end homelessness? I think when you look at the unhoused community, you're also looking at a representative population of the housed community. We're all very different backgrounds, religions, ethnicities. Therefore, we need a continuum of solutions. We need to meet people where they're at and not expect them to meet us. Number one, we all know we need affordable housing. We need interim housing. There will always be homeless people, unfortunately. We need safe places other than shelters for them to be. We need more supportive services. We need to address income inequity. We need to address issues of systemic racism. We need to make education and job training accessible to all. And we need to build programs for childcare and food insecure families. All of those things combined will help us address the inequities involved in racism, not one thing alone. Thank you for your time. It was a pleasure to be here with you all today, and I'm available for questions. Thanks.
Rebecca, I believe you're muted.
I am. Again, so sorry. Thank you, Andrea, so much. Before we jump into Seth's presentation, we are going to go back to Mayor Schaaf. She has to leave us in just a few minutes. And I'd like to get one more story from her.
I'm so sad because I really wanted to hear Seth's presentation, so I'll talk fast and I'll try and listen to as much as I can. I had one more slide in the deck if you can find it. I think it's the last one. And it's a story that I said if I had to leave, Daniel Cooperman could tell it because he actually made it happen. This is a story of Miriam and Fatima. Fatima was homeless, a woman who I'm sure went through all of the horrific things that Andrea just talked about, but she found her way to BACS, Bay Area Community Services, and Daniel Cooperman's lovely care at the Henry Robinson House in Oakland. Henry Robinson helped her heal. She had been incarcerated for a long time. She had been out in and out of the streets most of her life, but they actually got her connected to a job with UPS. And I can tell you the pride that woman had when she met me, talking about her Teamster membership and how proud she was. In fact, they offered her a promotion to be a manager, and she wouldn't take it because it meant she couldn't be a Teamster anymore. This was a woman who was working and had discovered this pride of what she could do in the world. And she had been matched up with a landlord who was willing to take a chance on a formerly homeless tenant that was receiving the support that Bax gives after somebody has healed in their transitional housing program, but needs some support as they transition to self-sufficiency. Miriam was an older African-American small landlord. Really, she took the back of her house and converted it into a second unit. She was living in the front part of the house. And what is beautiful was the friendship that had happened between these two women. And Miriam fell in love with Fatima so much, and she felt so good about providing her the chance to have stable housing, even though she didn't have any sort of rent, tenant, history, the kind of thing that she was formerly incarcerated, the kind of thing that would prevent her from getting housing, especially in the competitive Bay Area housing market. And Miriam loved Fatima so much that she ended up creating 2 more units to also welcome in other graduates from Henry Robinson House that was run by Bax. That is my happy story. And I hope that it's also a reminder that we don't always have to build our way out of this problem. The Bay Area has a lot of underutilized real estate. And when we talk about design functions, don't forget policies. It is time we get rid of single family zoning. It is a vestige of racist redlining and restrictive covenants. It is time that we allow people like Miriam to add a backyard unit, to convert the back of her home into a second unit, so that we can very elegantly densify and invite naturally occurring affordable housing into particularly neighborhoods of opportunity. So don't forget that there are policy things that we should be thinking about, not just design, not just building, but this is one beautiful story where both people truly benefited. And with that, I'm excited to listen to Seth. Thank you for letting me jump in, Seth.
No problem, no problem. Cool.
Thank you so much, Mayor Schaaf.
So yeah, hi, I'm Seth from the Gensler office in Oakland. I'm an architect there and been working in architecture for 20 years now, doing a variety of different types of projects. And some of the projects I've been working on recently relate to the homeless population, which has been really a wonderful thing to do. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the projects that I'm working on, as well as some other Bay Area Gensler efforts. We have offices in San Francisco and San Jose as well, so I'm going to touch on some of their work. And then globally, Gensler has a community impact organization that focuses on a variety of issues, large and small, and kind of champions everything from volunteerism and donation all the way towards taking on community impact projects, and so doing actual work and projects that are pro bono or low bono projects. And you can see this is their kind of priority chart for the past couple of years here. And housing homelessness has been one of the key focuses in Gensler globally. So it's great to see that. So just the first project here is the Homeless Action Center. It's a legal aid nonprofit that's based in Oakland and Berkeley that works with the Alameda County population. And they're a legal aid not-for-profit that help people get access to funding and through disability pay and other funding sources, and also find housing. So this is like a very small little office TI for them, and it was just 5,000 square feet in the San Pablo area, and it was just really wonderful working with them on this project. I think that they kind of came into this project kind of feeling like they were used to just sort of taking anything, any kind of situation and making the best of it, and it was kind of nice to help them look at this building and say, what is the best thing we can do with this building? What's the best kind of place and space we can make for you guys? And kind of see that transformation. and that kind of acknowledgement. Oh yeah, we can actually have something that's nice, and it's nice for both the staff, and for their population, because they do house the population, not house, but they host the population, the homeless population, in their office. Everybody gets to use the bathroom, and they take mail and hold mail for people who are homeless, and things like that. So the office does kind of become a little bit of a community hub for them too. So this project was just finished right before COVID hit, and that's why my photographs there are right before they actually moved in. So it's still empty there, but they actually moved in like a week or two before COVID hit. But they will be in there and actually using the space fully soon. So the next project is a project for Mercy Housing. So they're a nonprofit that creates housing for homeless people, and also low income and senior affordable housing. This is in Oakland, right on Telegraph Avenue, and you can see to the left there is the old YMCA building, which is now called the Hamilton Apartments. And Mercy Housing actually owns that building and operates that building right now, and that's a building of 100 ex-homeless people there. And basically this new project, which right now there's just a parking lot here, is for it's senior affordable housing. They're targeting about 25% of the units to be for the homeless population. They originally were trying to target 100%, and due to just some long-term funding stream issues, they've had to adjust from county funding sources to federal funding sources, Section 8 funding, which made them need to reduce their 100% homeless population down to 25%. But this project, we just recently submitted this to the city, so it's going into the planning department for planning review, and hopefully, it'll move forward as quickly as possible, and we'll keep this going. So these two buildings actually will sort of work together in an interesting way, because Mercy will, operate both of those buildings, and the new building will actually provide some support services and spaces like that for people in the Hamilton, the YMCA building as well. So this is actually something Andrea, I think, knows about very well. So project for HomeFirst, Andrea's organization here. So our San Jose office worked on this. This is very similar to the Oakland Tough Shed projects. The difference being that these were custom designed by our San Jose office, and both kind of designed the buildings themselves, as well as kind of a sense of community that they create. And so this is the first project, I think, and Andrea was saying, I think there's a series of more projects that they're going to be rolling out based on this model here. And this was also involving Habitat for Humanity, who actually volunteered to build all these units. So yeah, similar to the Tough Shed type project, where everybody has a private place to call their own, and then there's supportive services and restroom facilities outside of the units, but adjacent, and they're organized in a little kind of community. On the next slide, you can kind of get a sense of how they're organized in clusters, and then attaching to adjacent facilities. So we're really proud of that project, and would love to see that model implemented more. It is tough. I mean, as Mayor Schaaf was saying, there's policy issues involved in all of this, and to do a project like this, there have to be a lot of exceptions made for both to both zoning laws as well as building code, and so that's something that's an interesting challenge, where we want to make the most safe buildings for people possible, but at some level, if we break some rules to get something built quickly, it's better than having people be on the street. So it's I think a case of perfection being the enemy of the good. So I think there needs to be some structured way probably for people to do this, and to create emergency housing that follows a separate code that's maybe a little bit less stringent. and also, finds exceptions to the zoning. So it's an interesting intersection there. So keep going. San Francisco projects. This is a project for PRC, so another legal aid nonprofit in, I think Mayor Schaaf saying bye, in San Francisco. And this project finished up this past year. And very similar kind of program to the Homeless Action Center project. And then they have a couple projects that are in the works right now in the planning phases. So if we go to the next slide, there's a project for the Salvation Army, which had a building on Valencia Street in San Francisco that wasn't being used, and our office in San Francisco is helping them convert that building into a temporary shelter. And so part of that is adding, restroom facilities, laundry facilities, and things like that to the building. And I grabbed this slide from their presentation because I felt like it was a really nice example of showing, the kind of attention to detail and attention to quality that we like to bring to all of the projects, regardless of who they're for or what the budget is. And you kind of see a really nice kind of hospitality kind of vibe in that image on the bottom left, the bottom right there, that we're trying to bring to the project, which is really nice, to create something that people are in a bad position, but to try to create something that's uplifting. So, and then the next project is in the early planning stages, but this is a project with both Mercy Housing and Health Right 360 on Treasure Island. So there's huge development that's being planned on Treasure Island, and one whole city block here. You can see this colored, blue and yellow, is a full city block scale development, which would be an affordable housing and supportive services kind of clustered together facility. This is targeting, I think, 400 to 500 people. So, something of significant scale. Right now, again, it's just in the kind of feasibility and planning stages. But I know that's something that's, really exciting for us that we'd like to keep working on as that goes forward. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Seth. So we are going to get into our question and answer section now. So I have a question for you panelists. In every type of homelessness building, there are elements of positive community organically created within. What is the next design that will simultaneously capture that positive community while also providing a better solution to preventing future homelessness?
I mean, I feel like, this is kind of an easy answer, but just to jump in with, what I was just talking about there, that combination of supportive services on site in combination with housing is kind of, I think, the magic formula that everybody is looking for right now and looking to create. And so I think that speaks a little bit to the sense of community, but really to that notion of, getting people housed, but then, providing services to help them long-term stay housed.
Thanks, Seth. Anyone else?
I agree very much with what he said. Not everybody needs the permanent supportive houses services, but they might need more of a communal approach, like the tiny home approach. They might need to live in an environment where they're interacting with other people during meal times, in the laundry room. They can sit on their front porch and get a sense of community. I think we've got a great deal of people living in encampments who would rather have that than a studio apartment where they feel alone and isolated.
Great, thank you so much. Next question. What are some preventative things that can be done to support the most vulnerable demographics?
I think Project Room Key, the governor's project, is critical. It's getting people housed immediately and then finding out what they need, but get them off the street, get their bodies medical care, get them proper nutrition, get them water, get them clean, give them some dignity, and then provide the services and case management to help them figure it out.
And really just to add on, it's pretty simple. It's healthcare, housing, affordable housing, and then tougher rent control so people don't fall into housing. It's a pretty simple roadmap. There's a lot of hurdles to get there, but that is the roadmap.
Yeah, thank you both. For Seth, as the design representative, what are some design elements that you think are important to use while designing for the homelessness population?
Well, I mean, honestly, I don't think it's actually too different than how you might design, you know, for the non-homeless population. I think that quality of spaces, you know, quality of materials, you know, to having things that are robust, that have great sense of, you know, a light, natural light, great volumes of space. I think all of those things, you know, to me are really important. I think it is sensitive for the homeless population too. I think they're used to being in terrible spaces, and you know, if they go into, say, like a federal building or something like that to go to the Social Security office, they're not really nice, pleasant spaces. You know, they've got, you know, bulletproof glass, and you know, they're not comforting. You know, and I think, you know, being able to go to a place like the Homeless Action Center that has this great volume of space and really great light coming through the skylights, just, you know, it makes a big difference psychologically. But yeah, I mean, I would encourage people to think of, you know, make beautiful spaces for people, you know, regardless.
Anything, Andrea or Daniel, you want to add to that?
I think our shelters need a lot of work. We had basic things that I think could be done, like our lights go on in the morning at 7 a.m. and they go on completely. There's no way to dim them up. There's no way to dim them down. They're loud spaces. Many congregate shelters are big open spaces, which means they're loud, and that can be really assaultive to somebody if they've experienced trauma. So I think we could spend some time working on the shelters that we have to make them a little more livable and a little more comfortable for those who use them.
Thank you. What can anyone in the community do to help if they can't donate money?
Okay, I'm a homeless nut, right? I mean, I love what I do. I carry feminine hygiene products in my car. I carry hygiene kits in my car, and I carry snack packs in my car. And so when I come across somebody who is unhoused, I ask them if they would like any one of them or all of them. And I think I was only turned down once, and I've done this hundreds and hundreds of times. So I think that's a positive thing you can do. I think another thing you can do is look somebody in the eye when you drive past or walk past and just say hello. Just that sheer interaction of dignity gives them some respect and feeling that they're part of the community in that moment. The other thing you can do is vote. You can show up at city council meetings. You can show up at board of supervisors meetings. You can vote for affordable housing. You can vote for services. You can vote for shelters, even in your neighborhood. Use your voice to dispel the myths. I'm more than happy to send you information on what some of those are. But we need to come together as a community, because this is going to require a community solution, because it's a community problem.
Yeah, and I completely agree. Here in Alameda County, we have a few measures, whether at the city level or the county level, that are coming up at this next cycle. And then, you know, besides financial contributions, really educating yourself about homeless services and how to point people in the right direction, that can go a really long way. Now, that's not easy, you know, easier said than done, but that is something you can do that costs $0.
Thanks. Let's see. Are the cities open to developing the bridge housing close to communities?
They are, and we are doing it in San Jose. We have 2 sites. We have one at Burnell and Monterey. We had a community meeting, and because of COVID and the release of some of the building regulations, the city was able to use pandemic money to start building on that site without community approval. That created some challenges, but we've been working with the city to build relationships. And we're having community meetings, and I'm answering questions, and we're being present. And so far it's going really, really well. And I'm hoping that the success of our Marbury site, that the pictures that you saw, and the success of this new site will help us with the success of the next 2 sites. And people, the fear will abate because people will see it happen, and they'll see it happen well.
Yeah, I certainly
Great.
hope so. I'm definitely aware of some projects in Berkeley where there's been some temporary housing provided, and then you do have some negative, reaction by, the local community in the adjacent single-family residential neighborhood, which is really sad, and it's heartbreaking to hear that. And so I feel like maybe, if situations like that, do happen, maybe there's some more outreach that can be done with the local community to get people on board.
Great. How do these organizations work with the city/county, and how are they funded?
Our organization, 50% of our funding comes from the County Office of Supportive Housing. We've got 25% that comes from the city of San Jose. We've got a chunk from the VA, and then we've got about $2 million a year that we fundraise ourselves through foundations and grants. And then we work with grants through the government entities like the VA and the city and county. They release an RFP, which is request for proposal. We apply with what we suggest, and either we receive it or we don't.
Yeah, I would say most nonprofits are heavily funded through local government, well, state and federal as well, but predominantly local government. And myself, as switching from the nonprofit side to the government side now, I am on the other side of things. That being said, it's definitely a process. It takes a lot to get government money out the door, and then for our nonprofit partners, they have to jump through hoops to get it. So that's something that we can improve on from a government bureaucracy side. But yeah, and really trying to match public money with private money is a huge thing. Hearing Andrea say they raised $2 million of private money is amazing. And most nonprofits are way under that in terms of their fundraising efforts. So that's kudos to you.
Definitely kudos to you, Andrea. How would you inspire people to get involved in this major issue in the East Bay?
Daniel, you might want that.
Yeah, I mean, by listening to webinars like this one with this amazing panel, no, I mean, it's really tough. It's really, trying to tug at people's heartstrings, because at this point, if you live in this area, you know someone, or you know someone who knows someone who's either experiencing homelessness or just housing insecurity, right? Of like, especially in this time where so many people are applying for unemployment, there's much more of the community that's feeling, oh, I'm actually very close to homelessness. And so I can see the slippery slope that gets you there. It's really hard to turn people who are like the NIMBY, not in my backyard folks, into believers and supporters. But it really, as corny as it sounds, it's one person at a time of like, here's someone's real story, as the mayor presented earlier. These are people, we're from here, people go through things, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. We just need to do it at a greater scale to really cut down on our homeless numbers.
Yes, and also you can get involved with a local nonprofit, whether it's homelessness or food insecurity or mental health for children or families or adults or veterans. Find something that you're passionate about, connect with that nonprofit, do pro bono work for them. Gosh, we're always looking for that. We need it desperately. Every time one of our shelters gets designed and beautifully done, 3 years later, it's torn apart. They get used heavily. So there's all kinds of things you can do as an individual and as a professional. Just reach out to a nonprofit and ask.
Yeah, for sure. Where can we find the information that is being presented by Mr. Cooperman? I'm guessing it's the slide.
Yeah, the slides or the stuff inside my head is a little harder to access. You know, there's a really good report out that I took a lot of information out from on the Everyone Home website. It's I think it's everyonehome.org. But if not, just Google Everyone Home Alameda County, and they do a great 2019 point in time count with about a 50-page summary, explanation, everything you need to know to sort of get up to speed.
Great, thank you. Seth, how much research goes into trauma-informed design when creating spaces for unhoused people?
Wow, that's a tough one. You know, I don't know that, you know, the projects I've been involved in so far haven't dug too deep in it, but I do think, you know, we rely heavily on our clients, you know, and so the people who are running those organizations, you know, Mercy Housing or Homeless Action Center, you know, they have a, you know, sense of kind of what works, what doesn't work, what they need to do from their experience. And so they bring that, you know, the actual experience to the projects. From our perspective. But I think it's a great question. I mean, I think that we could probably all do a lot better to consider long-term effects of trauma and what that means for space making and place making. So yeah, thank you for that question.
Are post-occupancy metrics created and tracked to improve the design of future homeless housing projects?
Yes. So our bridge housing, the picture that you saw, that's a great question. I'm a nerd about outcomes, and so is our city. And so we developed a series of outcomes. Currently, our length of stay at the bridge housing community is 48 days. We're expecting it to be more in alignment with the rapid rehousing programs, which is anywhere from 90 to 120 days. But we've been able, with the intensive services, to house people within 48 days. From that site, we've had 40 positive exits to permanent housing. We've had 7 not so positive exits, people that spent a night or didn't spend a night, came in and went straight back to the encampment for whatever their reasons were, they chose not to stay. Those are just a few of the outcomes that we have, and we've only been operating since January.
Thanks, Andrea. All right, I think we're going to go into our maybe final question. The mayor had some pretty inspiring stories around this subject. I'm wondering what has been your most uplifting moment in your journey up to this point? Who wants to go first?
I'll start it off. You know, I think it's hard to pinpoint like the most uplifting point in my career. I would say doing work in the homeless field and with this population, every time someone goes from homelessness to housed, that is it. Like that is all that I do this work for, and I'm sure everyone else does as well. You know, there's different stories of, you hear how much trauma people have gone through in their lives, and then, you know, that makes it sweeter. But really, for anyone who goes from sleeping outside or in a shelter to permanent housing, that is it. And it's one person at a time. And so every time that happens, that is sort of how I know to keep on going with what I'm doing.
Thanks, Daniel.
We had a young veteran, he was a Navy SEAL, Ed, and he shared a story, so he's given me permission to share it. Ed came home, wasn't functioning well from his service, ended up being asked to leave by his wife. He lost his home. Shortly thereafter, he lost his job. He ended up living at our shelter and trying to figure out what next steps were for himself. He started a program for us that's still in operation called New Start. So he started to volunteer his time to help clean, to help with pest control, to help in the kitchen. He rallied other guests and asked them to help him as well. And he started this little program for us. And shortly thereafter, I want to say 2 years into it, we were actually able to hire Ed after we got him housed. And Mr. Howard is in connection now with his family. He is living with his sister and helping to raise his nephews. He is one of our managers in our Veteran Services program, and he is thriving. And if you ever ask him how he is, he always says he's grateful and happy. So Ed to me is an inspiration. He's somebody who did what he had to do to get well. He asked for help, he got the help, and today he's thriving.
Yeah, so not being, you know, in the industry, it's different. So just having, a couple projects of experience to report on, I think for me, it's not really about, the uplift that I get. It's really about the impact that we're creating out there. And so, as soon as we're able to finish a project, it's a wonderful thing. Projects are like marathons; they take years to realize. So Homeless Action Center took me like about 2 years before that project was just recently finished. And so just seeing the client in the space and, having them, excited about it is just the best thing in the world for us, and to be able to walk the space with them, when it's complete, is really kind of that's the big payoff.
Thank you all for sharing. I think we are going to, unless any of you have anything to add, last minute adds. No. All right. So I think I'm going to turn it back over to Patricia.
Hi, guys. Well, I just want to thank you all for being a part of this program. We want to thank our panelists, our amazing moderator, and to all the people behind the scenes that made this happen. Thank you to all the attendees. We hope we've inspired you in some way to design for dignity. And if you would like to make a contribution to our philanthropic partners side by side, please click on the link in the chat room to donate. We ask that you add an IIDA on the notes section so that we can keep track of all of our donations. And also, please keep a lookout for our next event of professional portfolio reviews. We're calling all designers and reviewers to participate. Thank you guys all so much for attending. Have a great night.